This is always a lovely first picture when I show my presentations. For those who don't know it, most of us don't. I only knew it recently. That's the CARICOM Secretariat main building in Georgetown, Gardner. That's just a snapshot of what it looks like. It's a very big building, an energy hub, if I want to call it that. One of the things we are doing very early is to try to make this building efficient so that we can practice what we preach. So that's just a starting point. If we go to the, I have the sorry, I was almost going to ask for me. So this is just the title slide here. So let's start with the Serms, understanding the Serms in a sense, a nutshell. What is the Serms thing that we're talking about? This is a sustainable energy roadmap and strategy, really for CARICOM. I would basically call it Caribbean, but it's really for the CARICOM Caribbean countries. Because it is something that is framed for and was approved by the CARICOM organ that are responsible for energy. So the road to where we are within the Serms is one which took time. And I must start here because it was in 2003 that the heads of government for CARICOM gave a mandate to set up a working group to develop an energy policy for CARICOM. And that energy policy was being pushed against the backdrop that there were a number of countries, Jamaica being primarily one of them, that was looking to diversify their fuel mix, given that at the time oil prices were on the up, and I think by that time oil prices had risen from about $22 per barrel to about $38, so it was a concern then. Those days $38 was high oil price, it's not like now when $50 is low. So that concern is kind of pushed member states to start looking at solutions that were alternative to oil. Natural gas was being looked at by Jamaica. Renewables was also being considered in some of the mix. Bitcoin was just then coming on stream, the first phase of Bitcoin. So the region decided that they would have tried to harmonize and look at options for having some kind of policy that govern the energy sector. And that policy, of course, covered all the options that would have been applicable in the CARICOM context, from petroleum to natural gas, to renewables, to energy efficiency, and a number of cross-cutting areas such as financing and energy trading and capacity building, etc. The policy was approved in 2013, 10 years after that mandate was given. The draft policy was really available in 2010 because really it wasn't until 2008 when the oil prices reached $147 a barrel that people got really serious about finishing the policy. You know, it was going through the cyclical process of discussion and discussion and discussions. And eventually it was received a brand new lease of life after 2008 and was finished as draft in 2010 and was approved and endorsed in 2013. So it was a long road. So, you know, but at least we have a policy on the table. There are critics of the policy who will say, well, it doesn't go far enough to do some things, but nonetheless, it provides a good framework that captures what is realistic within the CARICOM context. It gives scope for mixing the traditional energy systems with new energy systems, and it gives scope also for different things to happen. It gives scope, most importantly, to member states, to make decisions that suit their particular situation. So there is no requirement under the CARICOM energy policy for all member states to find the same energy solutions. The energy policy allows member states to identify those strategies and solutions that are most suited to their situations and circumstances, but nonetheless, look at that approach that can provide collective benefits to the region if pursued as regional activity and in a regional sense. So there are some things that the policy tends to regionalize. For instance, an option, one of those things are like building codes and standards related to energy performance of appliances and equipment. Those things have to be pursued on a regional basis. There are also issues related to the biofuel strategy. And now that can be regionalized, especially in the context with the Wood Island states. Some of them do not have the size to have proper biofuels production systems, but being in a region that has the ability and option to get large amounts of biofuel feedstock from the mainland member states like Guyana, Suriname, Belize. Those are the kind of things that we are looking at. Included in that is also the natural gas strategy. How can we take the natural gas strategy that is regional and really make it work? And I know this is something that many countries have been struggling with. I know Gardner has its own issues in getting this strategy up and running, at least from a private sector standpoint. But this is something that the energy policy allows. The Serms is intended to provide that cradle, this incubator within the policy to manage or to pull out and advance those items within the policy that are novel to the region. Fact is that the petroleum sector is very mature, natural gas sector is very mature where the region is concerned. Renewable energy and energy efficiency, however, are not as mature, especially some aspects of the renewable energy and energy efficiency sector are not very mature in the region. So the Serms was really an attempt to strategize and plan those areas that were fledgling, but nonetheless have significant potential to drive the agenda of the regional energy situation forward. So that is why we said, let us find a way to create a sustainable energy roadmap that focuses on the renewable energy efficiency aspects of the policy, so that we can really utilize those to gain some of the value that they can provide to the region, whilst understanding that the petroleum and natural gas sectors will continue to develop alongside the sustainable energy aspect anyway, because those sectors are capable of taking care of themselves. So that in a sense is what the Serms really, the genesis of the Serms was about. So it's really a planning our management tool that is also communication-based. It allows for frequent and reliable stakeholder communication and participation in the planning process for the region. And one of the things we believe that this will do is that this will provide the strategic approach will start to move the region seriously away from the projectized approach. While it is that the projects are necessary and important to inform the strategy, one of the problems the region has had is that there have been a lot of projects, but not really a lot of strategies. And so you find that when a project dies, in many instances you don't have much in terms of follow-up action or in terms of continuity, because it was just a project intended to be done over time. The project is complete, and then the information, the knowledge that is generated, all the experiences sometimes disappears in the project. So there is no framework within which to really make projects larger than just being a project. And that is one of the things that the Serms is intended to do, to provide that kind of strategic approach that moves us away from the projectized approach to the programmatic approach. And importantly, we believe that with the broadening of the stakeholder group to reflect a more realistic list of those groups who are working in the region, it helps to deal with some of the issues that are related to the lack of political continuity. One of the challenges within the region is that we have 15 member states, different geographical positions in the region, despite the fact that we are in the tropics, and people will say, wow, the Caribbean, it's also nice and warm and sunny. It's still for us large distances. When someone leaves from Belize to come to Jamaica, it takes them 2 days, typically, to get here. So, it's not as rosy and simple as it seems. But also very important is all the member states are on different political cycles, unlike the United States where, when it's elections, everybody have elections at the same time, so you really can time everything around an election agenda. In the Caribbean, all 15 member states have different political cycles. And so a member state which is settled and ready to do something in terms of their strategy and planning might be one in the middle of a political cycle, but then another might be at the end of a political cycle fighting for survival or for continuation, and there's another who may have just come into office who don't even yet understand what's going on. So we have to deal with all of those situations simultaneously. So one of the things that the Serms platform, the Serms will do, is in moving from the projectized political and managed situation you kind of create a regional framework that contains some of the things that the national strategies themselves will also contain. So when, for instance, the development partners are working within the framework of the Serms, and they are in the countries, are going into the countries to upon provide support, it helps them to be able to, speak to the new administrations as they come, find ways in which they can orientate what it is that they are going to be doing in the national agendas without necessarily having to depend on a new political administration for guidance. So, for instance, an IDB going to work in St. Kitts after a new government is formed would have some kind of framework within which, even though it's pursuing a national policy or a national strategy, there are those regional things that could guide and govern the beginning of that work program or platform. So the other issue is that there were some initial targets for the time being. Those targets are what we still consider to be rough targets that were set on a regional basis, because we believe targets are always good. It gives something to work towards. One of the things is going to be to determine how realistic are these targets. And most importantly, the Serms is intended to provide that platform that allows continuous dialogue, coordination, and implementation focus. And so it doesn't matter if everybody is talking to each other and is working in a coordinated way, whether one party to that player drops out or there's a change of personnel within one institution. For instance, if the energy program manager leaves at any given point in time, there's a platform that will allow for continuity to continue to go on if when the replacement comes. So that is a significant part. We are doing all of this. So what we have just generated here is really just a look at some of the renewable energy options for the region, just to show and highlight that there are many options available to the region. Probably it's one of the reasons why I not done as quickly as we probably could. Because we say when you have too many options, it sometimes become. And that might be one of the challenges facing the region. But it's good that we have a lot of options, and we are working to fulfill some of the potential of some of these options. All of us here are committed to fulfilling those potentials. That is why different countries are looking at different strategies and different opportunities to integrate different mixes of renewable energy into their systems. Even those who are looking at natural gas strategies are also looking at renewable energy as part of their systems. The fact is that the whole thing has to be framed within a vision. And the vision that we are articulating here is one which is really that we want to look at a new architecture of cooperation. And a new architecture of cooperation, meaning that a lot of times, much of the relationships that exist for cooperation in the region sometimes is based on personalities rather than arrangements. So if Dan and I have a good relationships, the Department of Energy and CARICOM will get things done. If we don't, then nothing happens, and that tends to sometimes be what happens in the region. We want to shift away from from that. Not downplaying the fact that personal relationships are good for the energy sector and makes things move easier, but recognizing that really what we need is a collaborative platform where there can be general sharing of information, sharing of ideas, planning of strategies, resetting of goals, resetting of objectives, and resetting of targets where necessary, so that we are always on the same page in terms of where to go. Not necessarily doing the same things, but at least knowing where it is that the bus is going. So that is one of the important things. The fact is that this will require I frame it as increasing knowledge. It may not be increasing of the knowledge per se, but more management of the knowledge that is generated, so that there is an increase in how much knowledge the respective stakeholders have. Because there's a lot of knowledge out there, but the knowledge is not pooled, the knowledge is not really organized, the knowledge is not really centralized. So the knowledge is really disaggregated and in many places. And if that knowledge is brought together, it really provides an increase in knowledge really that is available to the issues and the opportunities. That the vision will provide greater support to governments. Some governments feel it more than others, and so of course, just like with everything else, there will be differentiated support to different governments. So at the end of the day, the energy program should be able to support those governments who are weaker, to be able to do more and learn from those governments who are stronger and share, and allow that cross-fertilization of what is being learned from one member state with what is being done in another member state. So countries like Jamaica, which have made significant advances, have a lot that they can share with some of the other member states in Europe. And this will include issues related to policies and strategies and so on, technical assistance to support national programs. And that, as I mentioned, there are development partners working with member states to do specific things. And what we will do is try to cross-fertilize these things that have been done at the national levels into the regional picture so that other member states can learn and benefit from them simultaneously, even if that part of the activity is not being done in that particular member state. Then, of course, the issue of the greater coordination that will increase the impact and effectiveness of diversification strategy. And hopefully, once we have that greater coordination, that will improve access to funding and resources, because the development partners will see that, where there are clear needs and see where there is opportunity. And also not just the development partners, but also private investments. Because private investments will work best in a region where there is a clear picture, and coordination is always going to improve the picture that is available to those who are looking on the region, and that is what we really hope to achieve. And the approach has to be one which is therefore cohesive and coordinated, and therefore the architecture is one that we will describe. We should try to show that cohesiveness and that coordination so that we can most cost effectively reach the sustainability goals of the region. The three core principles of engagement: regional ownership, we have spoken about that on a number of occasions, mostly starting with the Energy Security Summit in Washington, when the coordination matter rose to the top of the agenda to a large sense. And it has been reiterated that there has to be regional ownership. The region must take ownership of those things that it intends to do. And so that paradigm is one which has been embraced by the development partners. And I must say I'm happy for the support of the various development partners who have not just, in a sense, agreed and supported this, but actually pushed the fact that the engagement should be, that regional ownership is important on the program. So there are multiple initiatives, so therefore coordination of the initiatives is going to be important, whether it is that we are coordinating those things that are being done by development partners, or we are coordinating those things that are being done by CARICOM itself, but through the institutions. That coordination is important. And coordination doesn't necessarily, as I mentioned, mean everybody doing the same thing, but really picking up different things and deciding where they're going to play a role and how they see themselves most effectively supporting the strategy. And the third principle, which is the bottom line for me, mutual accountability. I started when I started speaking earlier about the grid integration. It's one of the things that is at the core of this grid integration discussion that we are going to have later. The fact that everybody is going to be mutually accountable to everyone. So the days of hiding things under the table, the days of not saying what is happening and trying to hold information are days that are no longer relevant in the current context. We really need to get to the stage where we begin to have integrated work programs, integrated project matrices, etc. And those are the kind of things that we want to move towards. Those are the things we want to really push. And these are agendas that we are committed to advancing in the CARICOM Energy Program. We are committed to advancing it, and the development partners have been working closely with us, a number of them in particular. The World Bank has been working with us, the OAS have been working with us, the GIC have been working with us. So, the CDB have been working with us. There are a lot of, and the Department of Energy. I shouldn't have started calling names, I might get into trouble now. But anyway, you know the story. The fact is that the Secretariat, the CARICOM Secretariat has the energy unit, of which I am the head. And this energy unit is based in Georgetown, Gardner. And a lot of people ask Georgetown, Gardner. Why Georgetown, Gardner? Because that is where the government decided to put the Secretariat. And once the Secretariat is headquartered there, then of course all the units, the majority of units are going to be there. So we are based in Georgetown, Gardner. The architecture, the approach which we have been promoting is really one where we have the Serms as the regional strategy. And that regional strategy gives orientation to national strategies and actions. So the national strategies and actions draw from the regional strategy. In some instances, where the national strategies and actions may be ahead of the regional strategy, nonetheless, there are areas where there can still be filtration of regional issues into national issues, even when the national issues are advanced. And then the thinking is that these national strategies and actions will provide the drive for visible and replicable projects. The bottom line is the bottom line. You want projects on the ground. If there are no projects on the ground, then you have failed. So regardless of how ambitious your strategy is, no matter how nice your policies, if these are not leading to visible and replicable projects on the ground, then we would not have been doing our jobs. And so the energy unit of the Secretariat is very focused on using the strategy as a means to help drive national actions to get projects done, so that ultimately we would have been able to move closer and more realistically towards the targets which we've seen a little bit. And then it's those projects that have been done will generate the experiences which will feed back into the strategies and actions, which will tell you, inform the member states as to whether those strategies and actions make sense, or whether there is need for resetting, or whether there is need to now upscale. And then that will allow the member states to participate into the strategy of the region by really informing the regional strategy as to what is realistic based on what is coming out of the project experiences on the ground. And just to quickly, for some of those who may have not been familiar with this, many of you may have seen this before, but just to reorientate those who are not familiar, really the pathway is one in which the Serms looks at assisting the status and potential of various systems and assess the potentials of the various options and the policies and governance issues. And in those assessments of status and potentials, we can then set a regional vision, and we can set regional visions and regional targets. We have set targets for renewable power generation, energy efficiency, and by virtue of those, we have extrapolated CO2 emission reductions, just for the energy sector. The fact is that we then use these targets to generate a roadmap that speaks towards recommendations at the regional and national levels. And in a sense, this is just to give you some indication as to how we went about the target setting. It's pretty much roughly, when people ask me about the natural gas strategy, and I want to reiterate this position, because natural gas meeting is later. And people have asked, what is CARICOM's position on natural gas in the region? The bottom line is, if you look at the Serms, the Serms tell you that there are targets of 20%, 28%, and 47% renewable energy mixed within the regional power production. So there has to be something else to fill the rest of the void. So the bottom line is, there is scope for the other options, which is some amount of fossils. So at the end of the day, the work program of CARICOM in the energy unit is one that is based on energy planning and implementation. So we support the energy plan and implementation process in member states. Not going and do it for them, but support them. So we try to improve their capacity, and then we try to strengthen the regional coordination capabilities. Number two is also important for us. We try to mainstream climate adaptation into regional energy planning for two reasons. And my friend from the climate unit will be happy, from the climate from you, with the climate folks, and you will be happy. For two main reasons. On the one hand, there is a significant amount of energy infrastructure and energy investments that are being made that are susceptible to the effects of climate change because of where they are located. And we must understand what are the risks. When you start to talk about power generation assets and transmission and distribution assets in small island states, sometimes in low-lying countries that are susceptible to flooding, to hurricanes, and sea level rise, you name it, you must talk about adaptation because your assets must be able to adapt to the effects of climate change, the likely effects, especially when you're going to be making investments in hydropower solutions that are 50 years, 100-year investments. You need to understand the impact of climate and the hydrological cycles, for instance, as an example. But also, simultaneously, while there is an indication that the climate adaptation and climate mitigation financing will be split 50-50 when the COP21 discussions take place in Paris in December, where it comes to the mitigation, the Caribbean is not going to get much because we are 0.2% of the CO2 emissions globally. So if we were to fight with the Indias and the Bangladesh and some of the larger countries for mitigation money, we are not high on the totem pole because of this small amount of mitigation that is possible within CARICOM states, even though, of course, money is money and you can use whatever you get. But if we treat the strategy of sustainable development as one that is critical to the region and recognize that the biggest threat to sustainable development is climate change, and recognize that adaptation is therefore required for sustainable development, and that the biggest threat to adaptation in the Caribbean countries, in CARICOM countries, is the fact that there has been very little growth. And the biggest reason for such small growth where they exist is the energy infrastructure, the energy situation. Then we see that there's a clear link between fixing the energy problems to be able to pay for adaptation so that we can achieve sustainable development. So therefore, fixing the energy systems in the region is a climate adaptation strategy for the Caribbean. And we have been articulating that because this is one of the foundation principles and Ccets that for which Caribbean countries are members. We have been speaking to a number of countries who seem to be interested in driving that as one of the discussion positions in the COP21. And we believe that if we want the region to be able to afford climate adaptation costs, then the energy situation must be fixed. That is where we're dealing most. It reduces cost competitiveness for the sectors, and it also causes government to spend a lot of money paying for energy bills. Obviously, the other two areas of work program is to increase energy efficiency in the sector, and of course, cost-effective renewable energy. As I said before, we have not prioritized natural gas because we believe that the folks who want the gas, the folks who are selling the gas, they are mature, they are advanced, they are capable of taking care of themselves. We are looking at the areas which are fledgling and we require assistance. Nonetheless, these are the priority areas. It doesn't exclude us from working in other areas, including the natural gas strategy. So these are just the four priority areas that I've outlined here. So it's not all-inclusive, which is just the major parts. So I come to what is perhaps the slide I will leave you with before the discussions, because this is really a conceptual framework for the Serms platform that I'm presenting here, which is, as I mentioned, the kind of tool that we are talking about that will facilitate the kind of multiplicity of coordination and communication and participation of stakeholders with governments, with institutions, with CARICOM that will drive much of the energy planning, regional energy planning. I refer to it as a regional integrated resource planning process. Pretty much, the report so pretty much the final decision making, the highest decision making body in the region is the heads of government, obviously. So, we must provide the basis on which the heads can make sound judgments and sound decisions. The heads are fed by the co-head and by the CARICOM Secretariat. So there are two places from which most of the information that goes to the heads come from. The co-head, which stands for those who don't know, the Council on Trade and Economic Development. That's what co-head means. And the reason why the quoted is what makes it is what physical as a government is that energy within the CARICOM governance system falls under what is referred to as trade and economic integration, because energy is viewed as something that is critical to the economic situation of the region, and therefore it's viewed as a trade and economic integration issue. There are people who disagree with that as the governance basis, but that's how it is set up right now. Nonetheless, we from time to time try to have discussions with the ministers responsible for environment and those areas. So we work closely with the Office of responsible for human and social development, because we also see energy as a cross-cutting issue that affects human and social development. But nonetheless, it's the quoted ministers of energy that really makes most of the decisions that finds its ways eventually to the heads. The Secretariat has the energy unit that really acts on behalf of the Secretariat where energy matters are concerned. So when we speak of the Secretariat and the energy unit when it comes down to energy matters, we're really speaking of one and the same. because matters with respect to energy, the Secretariat are dealt with through the energy unit. The proposal, so these are existing. The proposal, so this framework exists. So the proposal is that to link these three things. So these three things are linked in the district already. The Secretariat is linked already to the draft government and the quoted. But to take these things and now link them to the rest of the architecture, really what we are proposing is the Serms platform. Of course, the focal points in the countries are already linked to the quoted through their different energy units. And through the CARICOM Secretariat Energy Unit also, there's a relationship that links the energy units in the respective countries. So there's an ongoing relationship here. So we could say that this four-piece part of the puzzle is already existing. This piece is what we are now looking at setting up to complement and to support what it is that we believe could make the whole thing more inclusive. So the proposal is that we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know some of you may have seen it in a different way before. We have agreed, I've been talking to all of the stakeholders, including the World Bank, who are providing good support in some of the discussions going forward, and now also the CDP and the GIZ. And we have agreed that initially when we made the presentation, we had presented it speaking of pillars which were based on the types of institutions, but we decided that it would have made better sense to move away from institution types rather to functionalities. So we set up working groups that are based on functionalities. So we look at 5 functionalities: 1 for financing, 1 for technical assistance, 1 for capacity building and research, 1 for information and knowledge management, 1 for policy and regulations. And that these working groups are to be chaired by regional institutions because the regional ownership is important. Financing is obviously CDB, and besides here is hearing this for the first time. So nonetheless, it's a proposal that I'm sure she would agree with. Technical assistance would be the CCRI, which is the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which is an institution, ladies and gentlemen, that is currently being established even though it has already been endorsed at the level of the quoted and is being refined to go before the heads of government before the end of this year. So this is an envisioned role for something that isn't yet existing but should be existing very soon. Capacity building and research, obviously, I might get into trouble for this one because I know the Trinidad and Tobago government, who is not here, has been articulating the establishment of a research center with support from the DOE. If that center comes around, then at that point we can discuss whether or not that center would be the focal point for that coordination here. But until such time, the natural fit would be the University of the West Indies. Information and knowledge management is another one I would get flack for. And I know Curtis received an invitation to participate online. I don't know if he's online, but certainly if he's online, I will know. But the point is that we believe that the issue of information and knowledge management is very critical to the focus of the energy program. We believe that the issue of information and knowledge management is not something that should be treated lightly, and it should be the responsibility of an institution that has a clear mandate from CARICOM, that has a governance system that reports to CARICOM, so that when the day is done, the work program and the strategy of that knowledge management institution must be set and driven by CARICOM and organ of CARICOM. The CRE reports to quoted based on its design. Therefore, I am comfortable that if the CRE is responsible for information and knowledge management, reporting to quoted as it is, there is the opportunity for quoted to set the strategy for the CRE, and use the strategic framework for the CRE. Under the current arrangement, what exists is the Caribbean Energy Information System, which has some issues with respect to the governance, because, in my opinion, the governance does not report to a body of an organ of CARICOM. Therefore, its work program and strategy are not directly influenced by the organs of CARICOM. There may be an indirect influence because member states might have a way of connecting to. the process. But I believe there has to be a clear reporting structure where that institution must report to CARICOM. And of course, the obvious one, policy and regulations, that's the energy unit. Nobody will argue with that one. We will manage and drive that one directly. And the focal points, which is the member states, this energy unit will also manage the relationship with the member states directly. The CCRE has been placed as a supporter for the energy unit. The CCRE has been established to be a direct coordination hub for implementation to support the member states acting on the behalf of the energy unit. The fact is that the CCRE, when it's firmly established, will be the only regional institution of CARICOM. I would not say regional institution. The Secretariat is not seen as an institution. The Secretariat is seen as an organization. The Secretariat, of course, is treated as an organization of CARICOM, not an institution. The CCRE will be the only institution that has a direct responsibility for energy matters and energy matters. Yeah, so that would be the energy specific. That would be the energy specific institution of CARICOM. Other institutions like CDB and 5Cs, which plays roles in, which has a role to play in energy. Their explicit mandate is not energy focused. They have other mandates that they have to serve, but there is an energy component of that mandate. So the CCRE is the only one that will be focusing only on energy, which is why the CCRE has been placed here as one of the central institutions really acting in the energy arena. This advisory board is a group that will be selected directly by the CARICOM Secretariat based on the focus of the energy program from one year to the next, and will be able to provide direct assistance on technical matters and options. So this is pretty much go at the part of the cabinet. And the advisory board it will be transparent. It will be transparent in the way it is selected. It will be based on pretty much those bodies which have technical competence in the areas that are priorities within the energy program from one year to the next. If you notice, there's this red line which says the Serms platform. What this really means is that the platform will have representation from among all these bodies. So the Secretary of Energy, through the Energy Unit, will be a part of the platform. The CCRE will have representation on the platform. The advisory board will have a representative on the platform. The financing working group will, through its chair, the working groups through their chair, or any other member that the chair nominees will be a part of the platform and the country focal points. What I have proposed is that we will have the country focal points serving 3 at a time as part of the platform, so as not to make it overcrowded, probably in 2-year rotations. Staggered, it's something for discussion. So 3 is a nice number because it's 15 member states, so it's easy to have 5 rotational terms. Compared to 4, then you end up with numbers which are not easily divisible. 15 is not divisible by 4. So that is what is being proposed here. What we are going to do now that I've shown this here is to open the floor for discussions. We are hoping that by the end of the session, we will be able, and we want to finish the session probably 11, a little after 11 thereabout. We are hoping that after when the session is finished, we would have agreement and a framework that you believe is acceptable, so that we can begin the process of setting up this framework and start it operating, so that we can begin the process of improving the coordination and efforts within the region and region. So we really want to get moving on this as quickly as possible. We are talking to the stakeholders. We want the stakeholders to provide us with some feedback. We want the stakeholders to say yes or no, tell us how they think it can be improved, say where they disagree or where they think there are things which we have missed, so that when we get back to Guyana, those of us who are going back to Guyana, we can operationalize this thing and get it done. And I know one of the good things about this model that we are proposing, just for the record, I need to say this. You can see there are some little arrows here. It means that if the chairs of each working group is expected to talk to each other directly. We don't believe in the up and down group, so we don't expect that if you want to talk to the guys that really need to come to the meeting and go down. We don't believe in that. I believe, you can go direct. But the point is that at the end of the day, the energy unit will just simply need to be informed of what is happening. So the energy unit will, of course, be an ex officio member of all of the working groups, attending meetings where possible. Different institutions will be able to join, the working group will be accessible to different institutions on the basis of criteria which we are developing. The criteria that we are thinking of so far will be related, one, to the history of work that the institution has done in the region. So if a region has an history of a body of work that is related to an area of focus, then that would make sense. The area of focus of the institution also is something that would be important to where it could be positioned. And there is the opportunity and option for a single institution to be involved in more than one working group. So the fact that CDB is chairing the finance working group does not mean that CDB will not be involved in a policy and regulation working group over here as a member of a policy and regulation working group, because policy and regulation is important to the financing strategy, obviously. So that is something that I need to make sure. And also the member states will be involved in these working groups. Different member states will be asked to serve in these working groups. Already there's an experience of one ad hoc working group which we are running on information and knowledge management, and which there are 2 member states. The Secretariat chairs that working group, and then there are 2, there's the GIZ and who else? GIZ, CARICOM, and Ccets. Right, so there's Ccets, there's GIZ, there's CARICOM, and there are 2 member states, Jamaica and St. Vincent. That's an ad hoc working group that was developed to implement a couple of key things that were agreed on in a workshop on information and knowledge management. So that's the kind of model that we envision. So reactions from the floor.